I think there's going to be a real force multiplier here with people that are leaned in on I can become someone that uses parts of roles that I've had in the past to then become more of a generalist and become more useful. And thinking of AI not as a disruptor or a displacement type of tool, but as something that can actually really push us as workers in a more productive way.
Hi, everyone. Freddy, thanks for joining me. You've got a very interesting story and a very interesting background. Currently, I understand that you are the lead product manager at PayPal Ads, where you've been building the actual business unit. And you've got a really interesting background. I see you spent a couple years running programmatic or programmatic lead at Uber, a number of years at Roku in a senior product manager role, and so on. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Dennis.
Good. I would love to hear a little bit about your background before we get into talking about what you're doing at PayPal Ads.
Yeah, sure. So I've been in programmatic advertising for the last decade. I started my career really on the sales side at Hulu, where we launched a programmatic offering to complement what we were doing from a direct sales side. And it really opened my eyes to how ad tech could help influence and speed up a lot of the processes that we were taking in communication with clients and how we could better meet their goals around the use of a DSP and an SSP in between how we transacted media. So it was totally new to me at that time, a little over 10 years ago. And it became a really exciting path for me to continue to explore and how the space was evolving, particularly around connected television at the time. And it led me down the path to go work at DataZoo, a DSP that was focused really specifically on connected television. And then eventually, when DataZoo got acquired by Roku, to work on a lot of emerging supply side technology that Roku was building out around the moat that they had created with the integration of DataZoo's demand side platform into their tech. So that my experience in programmatic has really been about trying to both learn and explore things that interest me and the ways in which ad technology is evolving and ensuring that we can best meet the needs of clients, how we're working with buy side or sell side clients, depending on the role that I'm in, through the use of advertising technology.
I'm curious. What did you study in university?
I was actually an art history major. It was interesting. I went to Hamilton College, upstate New York, a liberal arts school, who just won the D3 hockey championships. Go Cons! They really had a big focus on creative writing and English, and that was my focus coming into college. I ended up majoring in art history because I really liked the idea of pairing together a visual thing, something you can explain to someone else with the ability to convince and influence and write about something that is ultimately subjective in a way. And I find that those types of skills have been useful for me in a communication capacity, both as a product manager and in how in a lot of the roles that I've been in recently, I've had to translate between concepts that might be common to people that know what we're talking about in this crazy ad tech space outside to various colleagues in my organizations that might be in legal or marketing or finance and don't have that same type of context. So the communication ability I've found has been something that I've leaned on a lot in my.
Yeah, I completely understand. I think that is like one of the most important skills anyone in a product management role needs to develop, and it's also like one of the hardest skills from what I've seen, especially when you interact with anyone who doesn't have that experience, family, friends. You're like, how do I explain this to them in a way that they're actually going to understand? Yeah, for sure. Interesting. Yeah, interesting. I would love to hear, like, I would love to like really kind of dive into your experience with building PayPal ads. I think it's super interesting. So wherever you want to start.
Sure. So I was brought in by the team, Mark Grether and team to help build out our offsite ad specific function and product strategy. We have launched a program around extending capabilities that we have within our PayPal walls and the ability to serve ads on PayPal surfaces to premium environments across the open web, including connected television, display formats, and video formats, outside of our walls. So I've done similar types of offerings at Uber and had a lot of work on programmatic open supply in my roles at Roku and DataZoo. And I think a lot of what we're ultimately trying to do is to help prove out outcomes for our marketer clients and our merchant clients. The data set that we sit on top of our transaction graph gives us a tremendous amount of cross retailer insight and allows us to connect that transaction data to the advertising exposure that we're helping activate on behalf of those merchants. And with that, we've also developed a shoppable ads format that allows a user to buy a product through PayPal from the ad directly. And so it's connecting kind of on the front end side of it, the presentment of PayPal, the identity side of it, allowing those users that we understand have an affinity for a certain type of product or category all the way on the back end, the measurement of that in a closed loop capacity. And we found it to be a really powerful offering that's resonating in market right now.
So, so I understand that when you joined PayPal, they had just launched PayPal Ads, and you were brought in to really help build it into a robust business. Is that right?
PayPal ads launched at the end of 2024 with the first ads running across PayPal's own surfaces. I joined at the beginning of 2025, along with a number of staff that were intended to launch this offsite specific part of the business from the ground up, really. So over the last year, we've gone from really only having an on-site side of our business where we'd run ads across those owned and operated properties to now having a scaled business where we can run curated selections of media and PayPal data to clients across various forms of third-party media, including also adding our shoppable ad unit on top of that program called storefront ads.
Got it. Got it. So, okay. That's very interesting. You guys are moving very aggressively into really running your own ad network, and building and running your own ad network on your own properties as well as others. Super interesting. What do you so it's like, I want to go back to it. So you said what's unique, like it sounds like the most unique data point or signals that you make available is you've got transactional data, like what people are actually purchasing or spending their money on. Tell me more about how advertisers are leveraging that.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously retail media is a huge part of the space nowadays. And the way that retailers are generally making their data available is always going to be in a retailer specific capacity. If you go to a retailer, they're providing you that information about the consumers that shop within their own walls. PayPal obviously is a financial services company that has millions of customers and merchants that accept it throughout the world. And we therefore can see transactions that happen across retailers. We've branded this our transaction graph. It pulls together insights from PayPal transaction data, Venmo peer to peer payments, and the ecosystem that we've built up around Honey and how users use that to browse for products that they're interested in throughout the web. So we're able to create really complex user profiles that speak to affinity for certain products and categories, whether people are deal seekers, whether they're luxury buyers. We can do really interesting lookalike capabilities where we're able to see if a user might be more interested in a certain type of product based on how they've transacted across certain types of retailers. We can predict the type of behavior that they're going to want to transact in next. If they've changed their address recently, they might be a high intent shopper for a furniture type of category. So there's a lot of different ways that we can create unique and interesting data sets that speak to a number of different e-commerce verticals. And ultimately, we actually do a lot of custom curation from a data set standpoint as well. We have a whole taxonomy of segments that are easily acceptable or easily accessible, but we also will dive into retailer specific data. If a specific retailer is coming in and saying, I want to target my own shoppers, but also I want to see what they look like when they go and buy at other stores, we can help expand that segment for them and showcase new segments that they may have not necessarily known about in terms of their shopper propensity.
So I'm very curious to understand, like, who's the target market for this, and then is it primarily through self serve, or do you also offer managed service?
Yeah, really good question. So We actually are catering to all types of advertisers. We have, from an offsite advertising perspective, we have both a managed service and a self-service programmatic capability. So we'll run media on behalf of advertisers if they want us to run really complex activations, including our shoppable ads format that we can run to allow someone to buy a product directly through the ad. But we also make our curated pools of media and data together as PMPs available to any third-party DSP that a programmatic buyer might be using. So we work with PubMatic and Magnite as our SSP partners, and ultimately opt to whatever activation path a client might want to activate with us. So really agnostic when it comes to servicing clients in that way. Generally speaking, you're going to be talking about large enterprise type of merchants that will activate in that type of capacity programmatically or in that managed service way. But we've also launched solutions to cater towards more this SMB merchant set. We have an ads manager platform that is built right into our merchant portal. So it is not a separate standalone module that an advertiser, a SMB merchant would have to go out and seek and find. It is just a tab within how they already interact with PayPal that allows them to both become a merchant who could actually sell ads on their own merchant site and participate in buying ads through a marketplace. So it really creates kind of a virtuous cycle for these merchants to both make money from hosting ads on their properties and then reinvest those earnings into marketing their own services.
Super interesting. So you've been at this now for over a year. I would love to understand, like, how is it going? Like, what kind of challenges have you run into along the way? It's a new business within PayPal. Yeah, well, what's that been like for you? What are some of the challenges, and like where have you succeeded? Maybe some of the things you've learned along the way.
Yeah, it's been awesome. It's been a really great learning experience overall. This is the second time now that I've had this type of paradigm where I'm at a larger established tech company and this advertising initiative is almost like a startup within the broader company. And so I have a little bit of a blueprint of how you have to navigate that. Of course, there's a ton of context sharing. There's so much collaboration and alignment that's needed between these established functions that have existed at companies like PayPal for a long time, that exist at every enterprise company, the legal, finance, marketing type of functions, where you need to make sure that you understand their processes, their systems, and how you can ultimately get things done. Because that's the goal of any startup, is to run fast and to launch things and iterate and learn. And as I mentioned, there's been a tremendous amount of learning for me. I mean, I came into PayPal with a really broad background from an advertising standpoint and understanding how advertising technology all fits together from the buy and sell side, but a fairly limited understanding of PayPal's core business from the checkout and payments and identity standpoint. And these are all things that I've had to really expand my own knowledge on and make sure that I understand how exactly a checkout flow comes together. Because I need to build that into my product to service our end goal of achieving an outcome for a merchant. And so in many ways it's not conflict between objectives, because as a company, we're all trying to do the same thing. We're all trying to create value for our customers and value ultimately for our company. But there are different use cases for checkout products versus an advertising product. And so really finding that commonality has been important for us. And we've done a tremendous amount of work with our cross-functional teams on the checkout side, on the engineering side, to make sure that we drive that alignment.
I think it's something that I've found over the years is, like advertising, whether it's mobile, programmatic, desktop, web, television. I definitely have met and worked with a lot of like developers and product managers who really care more than anything about like user experience and just keeping the experience really pure. And the idea of like bringing advertising into it, whatever that looks like, just kind of like could dilute the experience, and they could just. I've run into people that are real purists around this and don't look positively around advertising, even though I think everyone it's more accepted, like understood. It becomes an additional revenue stream for the company. I'm curious though, like within PayPal, building this business, which is really kind of, a separate business. Like, have you run into that, or is it just generally been well received within the organization?
Not so much at PayPal, to be honest. I think we have a significant amount of common ground in terms of where PayPal's vision is as a company and the types of objectives that a lot of our kind of emerging teams that are working on new products, we're all fairly well aligned on this vision of ensuring that PayPal is present, is front and center in a consumer's mind when they're on a shopping journey. And I think advertising is so core and central to that idea that it is, very straightforward in a lot of these initial conversations we have to have about like, here's my program that I'm trying to build. And let me tell you the 30-second elevator pitch about why it's important. It comes across very easily in terms of we have a shoppable ad unit that is intended to help promote the ability to use PayPal, but also generate value for any of these advertising clients in how they want to work with us as a, steward of their marketing budget. Truly, that's how we ultimately like to think of it is that, we're providing a service to these marketing clients and ultimately extending the benefit of the trust and the value that we've garnered over decades of PayPal existing as a payment solution and making sure that we can then translate that into measurable outcomes for our marketing clients.
Yeah. Understood. Understood. I do want to ask you that I'm curious, this shoppable ad unit, can you like just kind of explain exactly how does it work?
Sure. So our shoppable ad unit is called Storefront Ads, and it really is intended to pull forward a merchant storefront into an interactive advertisement that can run across premium ad placements throughout the web. So we have direct integrations with merchants, not just on the back end of their website when someone is buying an ad product, but we have catalog integrations, we have checkout integrations that allow us to have that front facing storefront that a user and a consumer can browse through and ultimately do their shopping from the ad itself. So when they're interested in a product, they click into the product and have the ability to buy that product directly from there. So in the same way that you would buy a product and go and click on PayPal when you're in the checkout flow of a merchant website, you can click on PayPal directly through the ad and get pushed right into your PayPal checkout flow for that specific product that you were browsing. We also see a lot of really great results from people browsing and engaging with those units. And if you're on a mobile phone, you can swipe through a gallery of a number of different catalog items that might interest you, and then ultimately going and converting on the merchant website as well. So it really is looked at as a full funnel marketing opportunity, in that we have really demonstrable results in that upper funnel, the engagement, the awareness. People in the mid funnel really ultimately playing with the unit and clicking through and showcasing that this is something that catches their attention and increases consideration. And then, of course, on the back end, whether it's through the unit and someone actually buying the product right then and there, or coming back to it within a 7-day window, we can show within our transaction data that someone has actually bought the product after seeing the ad.
Yeah, got it. Super interesting. So, do you have an integration with Shopify and other large e-commerce platforms?
Yeah, we have an integration with all of the major e-commerce platforms. There's a lot that we're doing from not only an ad standpoint as a company, but also from an agentic commerce standpoint. So these initiatives are really all tied together in how we are ultimately allowing for our assets to be used in distributing merchant storefronts and products and catalogs throughout the internet, whether that's when someone's talking to an agentic platform, or if someone happens to be browsing a site that they're consuming content on and see an ad for a product that they're interested in. So our goal really as a company is to try to make sure that we're being extensible as much as possible and allowing that merchant value to be broadcast wherever their consumer might be.
I love your story. I love the fact that you went from like a sales role into like a product management role at PayPal, building PayPal ads. Like, tell me a little bit about that. Must be an interesting journey.
Yeah, I think my background in sales has really helped prepare me for a lot of the communication that's needed end to end in being a product manager. I often find myself in sales meetings and being kind of that point person for sales to help explain the technical intricacies of the products that we've brought to market in a way that is consumable and externally facing and doesn't just make people's eyes glaze over. So I think in many ways, what I didn't feel like I was getting out of sales was the deep strategic background on why does this thing work that way? And like that's sort of the North Star that I've had for my own career. And am I in the right place where I get to dig into something and understand how it works from a technical perspective? And ultimately, I've been lucky to get to the point where I now get to influence it and put my own perspective on why I think it should work a certain way. But I haven't also lost the real end to end go to market type of function where I still then get to be involved in those conversations and being external. So I think, the best product managers really have to do a bit of both. It's not just sitting in a back room and talking to engineering and not really understanding your customer. It's making sure that you could do a sales presentation if you needed to. Your salesperson is leaning on you to help explain why they should care about this, not just how it works, but the true value of the product. And if you can't really understand the value of the product in the way that a salesperson is able to explain it, then you're not going to be able to communicate those product requirements back to engineering in the proper way. So that's been a really tremendous learning lesson for me as I've moved out of sales and business development and partnerships into more of the pure product management function.
Yeah, man, you totally get it. There are how many times, have I seen salespeople that don't really have a deep technical understanding of product, right? Or you've got doing marketing without having a deep understanding of sales, or product not having a deep understanding of sales. So it's like to have the experience where like, hey, I got to go and sell, and man, there's so much I don't understand. I need to understand this better. Like for sure, you'll be a better salespeople, but to have the capacity to then move into a product management role like you are, and you're clearly building a career out of it. I mean, it just says a lot about your technical ability, your sharpness. That is not. I just have not seen a whole lot of that. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, just as a follow on to that type of conversation about having to bring in a number of different types of skill sets, it's also really fascinating to me right now with the wave of Claude and ChatGPT being these hyper assistant type of almost personal researchers for you on a day to day basis in an enterprise capacity. It sort of necessitates this corporate world where everyone can do a little bit of everything, where you're going to be expected to be a generalist in some ways. And so I think I'm excited about how I can continue to evolve and put myself into these, you know, different functions to allow for access to things like data science and go to market and even the sales part of it, where I would have had to go through a number of different layers of functions to be able to produce something that's useful to my role or to others. So I think there's going to be a real force multiplier here with people that are leaned in on I can become someone that uses parts of roles that I've had in the past to then, become more of a generalist and become more useful and thinking of, AI not as a disruptor or a displacement type of tool, but as something that can actually really push us as workers in a more productive way. So I'm excited to see kind of where it goes. I think we're still figuring out how to fit various LLMs into our day-to-day workflow and create automations that are going to become more and more useful.
Yeah, you are speaking my language. I am so knee deep into this. I think most people, from what I've seen, use AI to get drafting, creating some lightweight content, and so on. Help me research, build strategies and plans. That is like the surface. That's just the surface of it. And I'm like, I want to like, I'm now like, I look at everything. I'm like, oh, I'm just building a system that will, number one, like a very modern AI, like founded a marketing operating system. Right. And now I'm like, hey, HR, we're a small company. HR, wow. they need help. I'm like, I'm going to help you. I'm going to build out their system fully automated with their own GPT. Employees can use it. They can use it for like managing, managing all the primary use cases of HR. I'm just like, so when you talk about like AI and like it turns all of us in general into generalists. I completely agree. But if you have domain expertise in an area, it is a massive force multiplier, massive.
I'm really excited about a lot of the ways in which we're implementing AI into our workflows to try to bring people along and make sure that we can start doing work differently in many ways. Like one of the things that I found to be really useful from a product management standpoint is prototyping. I think there's a lot of interesting LinkedIn noise about like the death of the PRD and we don't you can just vibe code it. You don't need to, write out a whole requirements document anymore. And I don't think maybe that's true in certain cases, you can run fast at small lean companies that are building truly, new products in the AI space. But in most places at established enterprise companies, you still need that communication layer. And so I think AI tooling is really augmenting what you can do from a PRD standpoint. So I have my product requirements document, and then I also build the prototype to explain it to the team, to the engineers, and to my colleagues in the checkout side, and to my salespeople in certain contexts. It's more so a way to show them this is what I'm envisioning. It's not build this exactly and this is the spec. It's just a way to facilitate the discussion so that what used to be, a requirement of like someone's reading this whole document and then we're going to have a meeting and then they're going to have to put comments in. You can skip past a lot of what that would have needed if you just sort of explain the context through a visual first. And so I've found there to be a lot of success in that way and how I've implemented that into my own product building process.
I'm curious, what tool are you using for prototyping?
So I'll use Claude Code for prototyping. And generally speaking, it's going to build me out an artifact that I can then host in any, medium that would be useful. Oftentimes, because we are an Atlassian shop and we have pre-existing Confluence trees of requirements documentation, I actually will just have HTML artifacts built and then put that directly into my Confluence page. So I have them side by side. It's here's the written form of what I need and actually, the traditional explicit this feature should be this. And then here's the visual representation that you can actually play around with and get a sense for how a user might be using this. Because now, speaking about the generalist thing, now the engineer or the salesperson, whoever, the early MVP that you would have had to push out to someone where they play around with it and they're like, this doesn't work because of this. It breaks. When I try to show us a demo of this externally, I look bad because I don't have the main feature that I need. And we couldn't have thought of this in the initial MVP because it required that real life use case. We can get to that a lot faster now and ultimately get in front of it in a way that then allows us to feed it back into those written requirements and make sure we're tracking it appropriately. Because that's the thing that I think is the potential pitfall of a lot of this is speed does not necessarily mean perfect execution. It means you can obviously do things a lot faster, but it just makes you do things more fast in the wrong way if you're not harnessing it appropriately. So I think making sure that you obviously still have humans in the loop in many ways, but are able to catch it at the right moments to then feed back and in this example, edit the PRD to say, well, actually the sales feedback said this when they played with the demo. Obviously, there's a lot of other similar types of requirements when it comes to actually coding out whole repos of products that you're building from an AI perspective. But this is almost a step before that in terms of, still the traditional development cycle and all of that communication that's needed internally, but just using AI as that partner to help you do it in a more collaborative way.
It's a very good example of like how you can use AI in your role to really reduce the amount of time it takes to get, to get to producing a prototype that you can now share and people respond to. Sharing anything visual is always going to be generally better, I find, my experience for people who are maybe who don't want to read, just quite frankly. So the fact that you go like, hey, I know you go PRD, meetings, I need to understand, let's discuss more prototype back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back the communication, required as like the communication tax. It's a great example. It's a great example. I was gonna say I've been using Lovable quite a bit. I don't know if you've explored Lovable. It's very, very, it's built off the LLMs, but it is very, very good at producing real high quality prototypes, let alone microsites, web, whatever you want. But it's very, very good at it. And if you're not, it's always definitely something I would recommend taking a look at.
Yeah, absolutely. I've tinkered with it a little bit. I think one of the other really interesting things for me is I've now created almost a separation for the exploration of how I'm using AI and my day-to-day job for PayPal, and then my own personal use and having, my laptop on a personal basis, my own Claude subscription to help build out things that might be useful in my personal life. And I found it's easier from a mental model standpoint to be thinking of I'm trying to build something totally new and totally like without any restriction on it. Obviously, in an enterprise capacity, there's always a bridge. There's always a pre-established process or something that you're trying to fit into. And then, of course, let alone there being the enterprise gating or things that you have to get access to that can complicate that. But I've been building things like an agent to help plan my weekly meal planning and make sure that I'm getting my toddlers to eat vegetables. That type of thing, where I don't have to be thinking about, oh, they don't actually like this type of thing. It's all recorded, it's all able to generate these recommendations based on its building context. And that concept right there has been one of those sort of light bulb moments for me in that there is built-in context to all these LLMs and the enterprise portals through which you use them. It remembers your conversations, but structuring that context is the most important way that you can harness these LLMs. I have a whole operating system that I've built out that I, build the markdown files to specifically tell it my objectives, the stakeholders that I meet with often. I pull in meeting notes as I can to ensure that it understands how I'm communicating things externally. And these are all things that are really important to my job and things ultimately that I don't actually really own. But on my own personal time, there are things that are priorities in my personal life that will compound over time as I set these systems up. So understanding that I might like to shop at a certain grocery store and teaching it the types of things that I buy at that grocery store. And ultimately, maybe it will get to the point where I don't even have to think at all about a week's worth of meals that I'm planning. And I just go to the store, pick out whatever it tells me on my list and go home. Or maybe in the future it's literally I order all of it online. The agent does all of that for me. And I don't think I'm quite there on the way on that path yet, but it's really exciting to think about sort of the delegation of that responsibility and the compounding effect of providing it context in a system that you totally control.
And you're getting in deep. You're definitely getting in deep. Have you built like any kind of GPT or like any, like you're in Claude, I'm on Claude. Have you like built a markdown file and for your personal use? Like, is that where you're telling me that you've done?
Yeah. So I mean, I've right now the in the context of that like meal planner bot, it's an open claw bot that I've now created, sort of scaffolded a whole structure of I want it to be able to plan meals for me, but I also want it to be a repository of all the things that I've liked to cook over the years. My wife has always said, and we've just always been so busy, she's always like, we should really have like a cookbook with a place that we're recording all of these recipes. And obviously it would be nice to have something very physical and, maybe a little bit more charming to have something that feels a little bit more homemade. But having the ability to teach it that type of context about the things that I like to make, let alone eat, ultimately is the type of thing that I feel like will compound over time and feed back into that recommendation. So I like to make pizza. Maybe you'll like to have this type of topping on your pizza. That type of idea where I don't ultimately really have the time as it stands right now to be looking on food blogs and looking up recipes. And I want to be able to outsource that in my personal life, that work as much as possible.
I haven't gone there yet. I have not gone there yet. I'm like, oh man, that sounds. I mean, it just opens up a whole other idea of like, training Claude on me. interests, family, just feeding it everything. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like you gotta, like, provide, just feed it a lot of data, and you work with it, and then you begin to, like, build out, missions against you and your family, what you do, like, how your family operates, and, like, and work with Claude and others to, like, "Hey, help me understand how you can help us and support us as a family and individuals. Like, what are things you can do to support us?" Uh, feeding it context, feeding it data. That's a really fun idea. I don't know where that would go. I can't even imagine. Never even asked, never prompted anything like this.
I know and I think about it really in the context of being a product manager at the end of the day, that like this is a set of requirements that I need to provide it. What am I looking to do? What's the job to be done? I have the exciting and a little bit terrifying thing of jumping down the rabbit hole of this is that there are too many jobs to be done. And you get a little bit of the like excitement high of like I could do anything with this right now. And there is a power in harnessing specificity that I'm looking at it from I don't like having to look up a week's worth of meals and plan it and write it down all of the ingredients I needed to go at the grocery store. And if I could delegate that task away each week, it will save me time and kind of feeding it that type of information of like what a traditional PRD spec would say. And, in many ways, it responds very well to that type of structured thinking and then can help you kind of scaffold out how I described like the whole structure of like, okay, tell me the types of things you like to eat, who's in your household. And it's a little bit big brothery if you can get past that type of thing of like providing context about who you are and who your family is to an unknown entity. But as long as you're good with that, you have a real power in your back pocket right now of something that's always on and allow something that can really think without you having to prompt it. That's where I'm trying to get to is it's an investment in time and hours that when I'm off the clock trying to feed it that information so it can compound. And I think in a couple of weeks and a couple of months as I start using it in that way, I will be fully in that space where it says, okay, here's what you need to do this week. And this could be applied to any type of, personal assistant type of task. It could be monitoring your email inbox. It could be fitness tracking. Any type of thing that you're actively needing to research and spend time consuming information through whatever portal you use right now can be delegated in this way. And I think there's a lot of smart people out here that have already gotten to that fully, you know, agent-based workflow. And that's where that next step, I think you're sort of talking like there's surface level using the LLMs for that, search and research and building documents. And then there's the true delegation and automation part of it that can be very hard to accomplish in an enterprise capacity when you're trying to do your job, on a day-to-day basis. And it's hard to find the hours to then go and do this. So I'm using that personal life tasks as a means of learning more about it so that I can then find that right angle to apply it where I can on an enterprise level.
Yeah. Yeah, you and I are on the same journey. That's for sure. There's just not enough time in the day is what I find. There's just not enough time. Like, there's so many places you could take it. So it's just like I have like for me, it's like try to focus on like one initiative at a time and kind of see it through because AI has a tendency to very quickly kind of like if you don't watch out, it'll branch you off into other directions, and before you know it, you're like I'm working on 3 or 4 things and I'm losing track and you don't make as much progress and so on. But it's just so fun. It's so fun to build with AI. I'm absolutely in and now I'm like with Claude and Notion, I'm like, I want to like re-engineer everything that can, with tools and systems. So everything could be automated. Everything human review approved, boom. So there's no manual copy, pasting, formatting, or hey, getting feedback. Oh, I got to go manually Slack people. None of that. You can automate so much, so much. It's incredible. So, anyways, like I said, love that stuff. Well, listen, thank you again for coming and sharing what you've been doing. Your personal stories as well as your experience with PayPal ads. Really appreciate you taking the time, and see you soon.
Thanks, Dennis. Take care.